So we can start today's lesson, inshallah. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So this is lesson 20 of the Tafseer of Surah An-Nisa. And we have reached verse 32. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Ba'da an a'udhu billahi min ash-shaytan ar-rajim. ولا تتمنوا ما فضل الله به بعضكم على بعض للرجال نصيب مما اكتسبوا وللنساء نصيب مما اكتسبن واسألوا الله من فضله إن الله كان بكل شيء عليما. And do not desire or wish for or crave that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given some of you over others. Men will be rewarded according to their deeds, and women according to theirs. Rather, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His bounties. Surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has perfect knowledge of all things. So in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibits the believers from desiring to have that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave some over others. How is this related to the verses that we have been looking at so far from Surah An-Nisa? So as we know in the previous verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade people from devouring the wealth of other people unrightfully. وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَكُمْ بَيْنَكُمْ بِالْبَاطِلِ. Do not consume each other's wealth unrightfully. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. And Allah also forbade murder and killing one another and killing ourselves. So we see here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in this verse prohibited something that leads on to consuming wealth illegally and unrightfully, and that which leads to murder, which is envy. Envy is a quality which opens the door to so many evils. That's why in a hadith it mentions إِنَّ الْحَسَدْ يَأْكُلُ الْحَسَنَاتِ كَمَا تَأْكُلُ الْحَطَبَ النَّارِ. That envy, it eats away at your good deeds. Like fire, it devours wood. So hasad, it's a means, yusahilu, it makes easy many forms of, or many different types of sins. And so after mentioning those sins themselves, He then prohibits the cause for those sins. Another way of looking at this as well is that in the previous verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden two actions of the limbs, which is to take wealth unrightfully and killing somebody unrightfully. And this ayah speaks about an action of the heart, which is tamanni, yani wishing what somebody else has. And there are both different types of prohibitions. One is a prohibition relating to limbs, and another is a prohibition relating to the heart. Now, for us to understand the ayah, it's good to know the reason for revelation. Imam Ahmad, he reports in his Musnad that Salama radiallahu anha, she came to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and she complained to him and she said, Ya Rasulullah, yaghzu al-rijal wa la naghzu wa lana nisfu al-mirath. That, O Messenger of Allah, men participate in battle whereas we can't. Meaning they get the reward, isn't it, of going into battle. We don't fight, we're women, right? وَلَنَا نِصْفُ الْمِيرَاثِ. And we only get half the inheritance of men, which is not always the case, by the way, right? It's not always the case that women get half. Sometimes women get inheritance where men won't, right? But generally speaking, when women inherit with their brothers, right, then they will get half of what their brothers get. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this ayah. وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. None of you should desire to have what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to others. Likewise, in other narrations, it mentions that that it wasn't specifically attributed to Salama, but also to other women. That some of the women said, like as is mentioned, that some women, they said, "Laytana ar-rijal fanujahid kama yujahidun wa naghzu fi sabilillah." If only we were like men, so that we can do jihad just like the men do jihad, and we can go into war just like the men go into war. Right? So clearly they observed that there is a difference between men and women. Now this is an interesting thing, right? Just to analyze their position, right? These women's position, and these weren't just, as many reports mention, as in the riwayah of the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, and also riwayah in At-Tirmidhi, it was Salama radiallahu anha, right, who had this worry and concern. Yani, how is it that the men get to do something that we can't do, and they take all the reward, and they get double the inheritance of us, right? And in this day and age, if a woman was to say something like this, we'll say, oh, she's just a feminist, right? She just wants what men want. Right? Feminism, right, in the modern understanding, the modern iteration of feminism, didn't exist at the time of the Sahaba, right? So what made her say such a thing? Right? What made her say such a thing? And this is an important point, by the way, because I often see from many people that when people misbehave, or they might hold questionable positions on things, we quickly label people. Oh, this person's a modernist, or this person's a feminist, or this person is, and we throw these labels around very easily, right? And sometimes people misunderstand that just because a person might hold a position that might be it might be a position that someone from a particular ism adopts, doesn't necessarily mean they're adopting it for the same reason, right? Just like we wouldn't call Salama Ummul Mu'mineen, we wouldn't call her a feminist for asking this question, right? We wouldn't call her, even though Allah says, وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا, yani don't desire what Allah has given to others. So obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is correcting. This is a type of tarbiyah, nurturing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is nurturing the believers not to have this type of mindset. But we're not saying that Salama was some sort of deviant, wal-'iyadhu billah, or that she was someone who held practiced an ideology that was different to that of the believers. And it's a normal question to ask. How comes they get twice the inheritance of us? How comes that they can do something that we can't do, and they end up getting more reward? In fact, the companions in another hadith, a group of companions came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Ya Rasulullah, ذهب أهل الدثور بالأجور. Ya Rasulullah, all of the wealthy companions have taken all the reward. يصومون كما نصوم ويصلون كما نصلي. They pray as we pray, they fast as we fast, but ويتصدقون بفضول أموالهم, but they give charity from their surplus wealth. Right? So meaning, the wealthy companions, they can give sadaqah, but we're poor. We can't give sadaqah like them. And so this was a concern for the companions. They weren't asking this question because they were opposing the Sharia. They just generally wanted to know, how do we deal with this? So the likes of Salama, who asked this question, that why can't we be like men and go into war like them? Or why can't we have the same inheritance as men? They weren't saying or raising these questions as an objection. They weren't raising these questions because they opposed what the Qur'an and the Sunnah stated in terms of rulings. It was just a curiosity and an attempt to understand why matters are the way they are. Now, of course, as believers, we say sami'na wa ata'na, we hear and we obey. But that doesn't mean that therefore we don't seek to aspire, the wisdom and understand the wisdom behind rulings. Okay, so this is an important point. So I think that, you know, the position of Salama in asking this question is interesting. Again, to reiterate that, and we have to be careful, because we do live in a time where we do live amongst people that hold different belief systems and ideologies and isms, that, and we don't fall into this trap that sadly I see some young people fall into, that every problem in society we start just blaming isms after isms. Oh, this is feminism, or this is liberalism, or this is modernism, right? And all it is just a believer just acting very normal, right? I mean, recently I had to deal with a situation where there was like a marital dispute, and there was a dispute in terms of finances, how finances are to be managed between the couple, right? And so in this situation, the wife had a source of income which was hers technically by Sharia, and the husband wouldn't have a right to that source of income because it was hers. And then there were accusations made, oh, this is just feminism, you know, women want to have their own money, this is a type of feminism. I mean, do you see the problem here, right? If something doesn't go our way and we just like throwing these labels around, and you know what, it can make believers become very spiteful. And you see this sort of mindset among shabab, like everything is just negative, everything you're just blaming, everything left, right and center, where it just could be normal human behavior or just a poor understanding of the religion, not necessarily that a person has been corrupted by some foreign ideology, right? And the negative impact of that is that you can come across being a very imbalanced individual, whereas to the normal observer, right? To the normal observer, and this is just normal human behavior, but you're characterizing them as being some sort of evil person that holds some evil ideology, right? I mean, take for the issue of polygamy, right? If a woman doesn't like the idea of her husband marrying another woman, people start maybe accusing her of being some modern feminist. No, sister, you have to accept the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah has allowed polygamy and you shouldn't oppose it. Right? I mean, there's the wives of the companions. I mean, you know, they had jealousy. The wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they had jealousy amongst themselves. It's a normal human trait. We don't have to, you know, start accusing people of you know, as I said, of adopting particular ideologies simply because of that, right? And it's not it's just a warped way of thinking, right? And so we have to be careful, right? We don't want to come across as irrational people that just, you know, throw around labels very, very easily. And as I said, I think psychologically this has a damaging effect on people, right? Because you know, they start looking at everything through the lens of isms, and they blame everyone but themselves for their problems in life. Anyhow, going back to the discussion. So as we said, some of the scholars, they said that this is, you know, from the this ayah was revealed as a result of some women questioning the Islamic ruling on the fact that women will get half the inheritance, or that women can't do certain things that men do. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this ayah as a result, to teach the believers a very important principle which acts as it's a preventative description or a preventative instruction that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in this ayah. By not wishing what other people have is a means to protect yourselves from spiritual harms, the spiritual harms of envy and jealousy, as well as other types of harms: murder, theft, taking other people's wealth unrightfully. And you know, as we know, you know, the first sin that was, in the first major crime that was committed on earth was a result of hasad. the first act of murder in the sons of Adam was a result of envy. It was a result of hasad and wishing what somebody else had. This is what leads to the usurpation of wealth and theft, spilling of blood. Right? And we see history is filled with this. Right? Imperialism and colonialism, and desiring and coveting what other people possess. So a lot of fasad and evil takes place as a result of people not understanding this verse and implementing the guidance within this verse. It's a normal human trait. If we think about it, when a human being sees what other people possess, it triggers something within themselves to desire what other people have. You see somebody with wealth, you see somebody with knowledge, you see somebody with status, you see somebody with a beautiful family. Naturally, human beings, when they see other people have what they don't have, it instigates something and stirs something within their soul. The question is though, how do we manage that? How do we manage that? Now, either we as human beings, we desire that those blessings are stripped away from other people and that we take it for ourselves. This is known as hasad, envy, blameworthy hasad. And this is which is completely forbidden. And you see someone with a blessing and you say, no, I don't want that. I'm not happy with the fact that that person has that blessing. I want that blessing for myself. This is hasad, this is envy. And the danger of this, why is it such a dangerous disease? A sickness of the heart. Because when you want that blessing to be taken away from another believer, you are essentially disagreeing with the qadr of Allah. You are saying, I don't agree with Allah. I don't agree with you, O Allah, that you have blessed this person in this way. That shouldn't be the case. I should have it. This is how dangerous envy is, hasad is. But then there is another type of envy where you don't necessarily wish for that blessing to be removed. You don't wish for that blessing to be removed, but you just desire what they have. So you see someone with wealth, you say, MashaAllah, this person has wealth, may Allah put barakah in their wealth, but I want to have wealth like that person. This is known as ghibta, or another form of hasad. And this is where there is a lot of discussion about whether this type of envy is permissible or not, is ghibta. Now, we can all establish that at the very least, if this envy is free from desiring the removal of that blessing from somebody else, then that type of envy is not completely forbidden. Right? As Ar-Razi, he says, and if it's free from tamanni zawalun ni'mah, any wishing the removal of the blessing, he says, فَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ جَوَّزَ ذَلِكَ. He says, from amongst the scholars are those who permitted that. As I said, you see somebody with wealth, and you said, oh, I wish I had wealth like them, but may Allah bless that person's wealth. This is, maybe you can say, at the very least, mubah, at the very least, you could say. Maybe disliked even. Right? As for the hadith, لا حسد إلا في اثنتين, there is to be no envy except in two situations. رجل آتاه الله مالا فهو يسلطها في سبيل الله. That one exception to the rule is that a man that Allah has blessed with wealth, but he spends it in the way of Allah. So you wish you had wealth so you can spend in the way of Allah. And another man that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught him the Qur'an, right, and he recites it day and night. So you wish you had the Qur'an like that. These are the two exceptions to hasad, but the scholars, they say this hasad is the ghibta, because you're not wishing for the blessing to be removed from that person. So this is ghibta. Meaning, so la hasada illa fi ithnatain, meaning if there were two things, permissible types of envy that are worthy of being envious over, then it's these two things. Basically, knowledge and charity. Knowledge and charity. And if you see these two qualities in a person, that this person has knowledge and you wish to have knowledge like them, then that's something worthy of being envious over in a good way. And likewise, if someone is wealthy and he uses that wealth, building masajid and madaris, this is a noble thing to be envious of in a good way. But then, so he said, فَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ جَوَّزَ ذَلِكَ. From amongst the scholars were those who permitted that. إِلَّا أَنَّ الْمُحَقِّقِينَ قَالُوا. However, he said some of the muhaqqiqeen, some of the scholars who, try to outweigh the different positions and opinions on matters, قَالُوا هَذَا أَيْضًا لَا يَجُوزُ. They also said, actually, even this type of envy is not permissible. Why? لأن تلك النعمة ربما كانت مفسدة في حقه في الدين. Because that thing that you desire might actually be bad for you. So when you see someone with wealth, right, or you see someone with, a very happy married life, for example, and you say to yourself, I wish I had that happy married life like that person has, right? You don't know what's good for you. You don't know what's good for you. You don't know what will be harmful for your deen. So from that perspective, and this is just a position, I don't necessarily agree with it, but it's a position of some scholars. Why? Because that ni'mah could be mafsada. That blessing could, for you as an individual, could be harmful to you. Like especially if it's wealth. If you think about wealth, right? Maybe Allah chose not to make you wealthy, because He knows that if He had given you wealth, it would corrupt you. فلهذا السبب قال المحققون. For this reason, the muhaqqiqun, they said, إنه لا يجوز أن يقول اللهم أعطني دارا مثل دار فلان. That's why some of the scholars, they said, it is not befitting for a person to say and make the dua, Oh Allah, give me a house like the house of so-and-so. Allahumma a'tini daran mithla dari fulan. Give me a house like this person's house. وَزَوْجَةً مِثْلَ زَوْجَتِي فُلَانٍ. Or give me a wife like this person's wife. Rather, it's more befitting that a person says, Allahumma a'tini ma yakunu salahan fi dini wa dunyaya wa ma'adi wa ma'ashi. Oh Allah, give me that which is good for me in my deen, in my dunya, my life and my akhirah. Right? Give me that which is good. And if you start going into specifics, like, oh, I really want this, you don't know whether that thing's going to be good for you. And that's why he says, وَإِذَا تَأَمَّلَ الْإِنسَانِ كَثِيرًا. And that's why if a person was to reflect, لَمْ يَجِدْ دُعَاءً أَحْسَنْ مِمَّا ذَكَرَهُ اللَّهُ فِي الْقُرْآنِ تَعْلِيمًا لِعِبَادِهِ. We will realize that there is nothing better than the dua that Allah taught us in the Qur'an. رَبَّنَا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Oh Allah, give us good in this life and good in the afterlife and save us from the hellfire. Yani, you're asking for hasana. You're not asking for a specific thing. Now, this doesn't mean it's wrong to ask for a specific thing. We're not saying that. But understand the point being said here. We don't always know what is truly good for us. And that's why we make dua istikhara, isn't it? Allahumma in kunta ta'lam anna hadha al-amr khayrun li fi dini wa ma'ashi wa aqibati amri. Oh Allah, if this matter is good for me, right, in my deen, my dunya, my ma'ash, my living, my akhirah, faqdirhu li wa yassirhu li. Decree it and facilitate it. Right? That's what istikhara is about. Istikhara is about you not knowing whether this thing is actually good for you or not. You don't actually know whether it's good for you. Allah knows. That's why you shouldn't be insistent that I definitely want X, Y, and Z. Ask Allah to choose for you. And He will decide what is best for you. And that's why is reported Al-Hasan, he said, لا يتمنى أحدنا المال فلعل هلاكه في ذلك المال. And it's not befitting that a person should wish for a specific type of wealth or a specific amount of wealth. Perhaps his destruction will be in that wealth. Right? So, of course, we ask for rizq hasanan, isn't it? Allahumma inni as'aluka rizqan tayyiban. We ask for good rizq. But notice here, rizqan tayyiban. We ask for rizq which is tayyib, which is good, which will bring khayr and barakah to your life. right? So here, that, you know, so the point being here is that the idea of this notion of wishing for something that you see that somebody else has, where does that tamanni originate from? It's something you have to really look down. Why is it that a person covets and desires what other people possesses? What is it? Is it the fact that you are not content with what Allah has given to you? Is it because you genuinely think that you know what is truly good for you and you're not resigning your affairs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's why Imam al-Qurtubi rahimahullah, I mean, he held a similar position where he says that وَقَدْ اخْتَلَفَ الْعُلَمَاء, the scholars differ whether ghibta falls under this prohibition. So we said we have hasad and we have ghibta. Hasad is when you wish tamanni zawalu ni'mah. That's when you wish for the blessing to be removed from somebody. Ghibta is where the blessing isn't removed. So he said, is ghibta, does it fall under this prohibition in this ayah? He said the scholars have differed. Right? And the ghibta, as he describes, وَهِيَ أَنْ يَتَمَنَّ الرَّجُلُ أَنْ يَكُونَ لَهُ حَالُ صَاحِبِهِ وَإِن لَمْ يَتَمَنَّ زَوَالَ حَالِهِ. That's when you wish to be like somebody else or to have what somebody else has without wishing for that blessing to be removed. But he says, وَالْجُمْهُورُ عَلَى إِجَازَةِ ذَلِكَ. According to the majority of the scholars, they permitted that. Malik wa ghayruhu, right? And they said this is the meaning of the hadith, La hasada illa fi ithnatayn. Yani, there is to be no envy except in two cases, meaning that these are two cases which indicate, and if there's anything which is worthy of having ghibta over, it would be Qur'an, basically ilm and Qur'an, and mal, wealth, which is spent in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, at the very least, it's, you know, jaiz for you to wish that you see someone driving a Ferrari and you said, oh, I wish I had a Ferrari like him. But it's not la yanbaghi, it's not something which is not befitting. Right? For those reasons we mentioned before, because the believer is someone who realizes that he doesn't know what's truly good for him, and so he surrenders himself to the qadr of Allah and to the rida of Allah with Allah's taqseem and the way that Allah has apportioned His provisions for His servants. As for tamanni, right? As for wishing for, you know, good deeds, for example, and that's why Ibn Atiyya rahimahullah, he mentions, you know, tamanni في الأعمال الصالحة, التمني في الأعمال الصالحة, يعني wishing to have good deeds like somebody else, and that's fine. Even the Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم, he wished, يعني وددت أن أقتل في سبيل الله ثم أحيا, like I wish I could be killed in the way of Allah and then be brought back to life. ثم أقتل ثم أحيا, and then die again in the way of Allah, then be killed again and then be brought back to life, due to the sharaf and the nobility of martyrdom. So he wished for something, right? There are other hadith that, you know, wa shawqa ila ikhwani, like, oh, if only I could see my brothers. He wished to see his brothers, meaning who are his brothers? alladhina yaji'una min ba'di, those who come after me, yu'minuna bi wa lam yarawni, those who believed in me even though they did not see me. So even the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wished for certain things, but those were righteous actions. So that's, you know, not a problem, right? So the key thing is that as long as that tamanni doesn't lead to al-hasad and tabaghud, it doesn't lead to envy, like blameworthy envy, nor does it lead to tabaghud, a type of spite and hatred and malice, then it is not forbidden according to this ayah. Now here, I want to draw your attention to how Ibn Ashur in his Tafseer categorizes the different types of tamanni. So he actually mentions there are 6 types of tamanni, and I like the way he classified this, because it shows you the diversity of the different types of tamanni that there are. So he says the first type, منها أن يتمنى ما هو من فضل الله غير ملتفت إلى شيء في يد الغير ولا مانع يمنعه من شرع أو عادة. It's to wish for one of the min fadlillah, yani to wish to have something from the grace of Allah. You're not looking at what other people possess, right? There's nothing that prohibits you from wishing that thing in the Sharia. There is nothing that prevents you from attaining that thing as well, right? So for example, wishing for shahada fi sabilillah, as we mentioned, wishing for martyrdom, that's hoping for the grace of Allah. You're not looking at anybody else. This is not impermissible to wish for. It's not something which is impossible. You know, to wish for things in that situation, something which is good, as we said, there's no problem with that. The second type of thing to wish for is أن يتمنى ما لا يمكن حصوله لمانع عادي أو شرعي. The second type of thing to wish for is to wish for something which is not possible to attain, either due to it not being actually physically possible or due to a shari'i reason. Like the situation where whether we say Salama or some of the other companions wish to have twice their inheritance, or wish to have the inheritance of men, or wish to have the same ruling as men when it comes to participating in battle. And is it allowed for a woman to say, I want to have the same inheritance as a man? This is precisely why Allah revealed this ayah. وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Don't wish to covet and to desire what other people Allah has favored with. That's the second type of tamanni. Again, so the second type is to desire something which is not possible to attain, either due to a shari'i reason or due to it not being actually even possible. The third type of tamanni, أن يتمنى تمنيا يدل على عدم الرضا بما ساقه الله تعالى والضجر منه, is to wish for something in a way which shows that you are not pleased with what Allah has decreed. Right? أو على الاضطراب والانزعاج, يعني you desire something and what it indicates that you're not pleased with something that Allah has decreed, whether in terms of qadar or in terms of shara', in terms of a law. Right? You're not happy. Okay, Allah has given twice the inheritance to men than women in certain cases. You're not happy with that. Right? This inzi'aj and ittirab, instability, or this not being pleased, right, in this situation with such rulings is problematic. This is the third type of tamanni. The fourth type he mentions, وَمِنْهَا أَنْ يَتَمَنَّ نِعْمَةً تُمَاثِلُ نِعْمَةً فِي يَدِ الْغَيْرِ مع إمكان حصولها للمتمني بدون أن تسلب من التي هي في يده, which is the one we spoke about before. You wish to have a blessing that another person has without that blessing being removed, which we've spoken about, like wishing to, desiring to have the knowledge of a scholar, right, or the wealth of a person to spend in the way of Allah. The fifth, right, is the one that we spoke about as well, to wish for something, right, that somebody else has, but also desiring for that blessing to be taken away from somebody else. And the sixth form, right, which is the worst form of envy. You desire for a blessing to be taken away from someone even though you don't want it yourself. So you see somebody with the blessing of wealth and inside of you, like, why does this person have so much wealth? You don't even want that wealth yourself, but you just don't like the fact that that person has wealth, or that person is happily married. It's not as if you desire it yourself, or you see someone happy in life You just don't want you don't want that person to be happy. It's not as if you want that happiness for yourself. No, you just don't like the fact that that person is happy. This is the hasad, worst form of hasad. The worst form of hasad. So after mentioning these 6 types, we'll break for salah in a minute, inshallah. He mentions that the first and the fourth are prohibited. So the first type of tamanni, right? غير منهي. The first and the fourth are not prohibited. Like wishing for shahada, right? Or wishing to have knowledge. And these types that type of envy is absolutely fine. Okay, inshallah. As for the other types, we will speak about later, inshallah. So we'll break for Salat al-Isha, inshallah, and we will resume after Salah, immediately after Salah, inshallah.
واستقيموا واعتدلوا الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أومن كان ميتا فأحييناه وجعلنا له نورا يمشي به في الناس كمن مثله في الظلمات ليس بخارج منها كذلك زين للكافرين ما كانوا يعملون وكذلك جعلنا في كل قرية أكابر مجرميها ليمكروا فيها وما يمكرون إلا بأنفسهم وما يشعرون. وإذا جاءتهم آية قالوا لن نؤمن حتى نؤتى مثل ما أوتي رسل الله الله أعلم حيث يجعل رسالته سيصيب الذين أجرموا صغار عند الله وعذاب شديد بما كانوا يمكرون. فمن يرد الله أن يهديه يشرح صدره للإسلام ومن يرد أن يضله يجعل صدره ضيقا حرجا كأنما يصعد في السماء كذلك يجعل الله الرجس على الذين لا يؤمنون. وهذا صراط ربك مستقيما قد فصلنا الآيات لقوم يذكرون. لهم دار السلام عند ربهم وهو وليهم بما كانوا يعملون. ويوم يحشرهم جميعا يا معشر الجن قد استكثرتم من الإنس وقال أولياؤهم من الإنس ربنا استمتع بعضنا ببعض وبلغنا أجلنا الذي أجلت لنا قال النار مثواكم خالدين فيها إلا ما شاء الله إن ربك حكيم عليم. وكذلك نولي بعض الظالمين بعضا بما كانوا يكسبون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. ويوم يحشرهم جميعا يا معشر الجن قد استكثرتم من الإنس وقال أولياؤهم من الإنس ربنا استمتع بعضنا ببعض وبلغنا أجلنا الذي أجلت لنا قال النار مثواكم خالدين فيها إلا ما شاء الله إن ربك حكيم عليم. وكذلك نولي بعض الظالمين بعضا بما كانوا يكسبون. يا معشر الجن والإنس ألم يأتكم رسل منكم يقصون عليكم آياتي وينذرونكم لقاء يومكم هذا قالوا شهدنا على أنفسنا وغرتهم الحياة الدنيا وشهدوا على أنفسهم أنهم كانوا كافرين. ذلك أن لم يكن ربك مهلك القرى بظلم وأهلها غافلون ولكل درجات مما عملوا وما ربك بغافل عما يعملون. وربك الغني ذو الرحمة إن يشأ يذهبكم ويستخلف من بعدكم ما يشاء كما أنشأكم من ذرية قوم آخرين إنما توعدون لآت وما أنتم بمعجزين. قل يا قوم اعملوا على مكانتكم إني عامل فسوف تعلمون من تكون له عاقبة الدار إنه لا يفلح الظالمون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Inshallah ta'ala, after the remaining sunnah, the tafsir class will be resuming, inshallah ta'ala. So please to take part and benefit, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khairan.
Is it fine? Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So inshallah we will continue the class. So we started the class before Salat al-Isha. We are looking at verse 32 of Surah An-Nisa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ba'da wa na'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, wa la tatamannaw ma faddala Allahu bihi ba'dakum ala ba'd. للرجال نصيب مما اكتسبوا وللنساء نصيب مما اكتسبن واسألوا الله من فضله إن الله كان بكل شيء عليما. And do not crave or desire or wish for that which Allah has given some of you over others. Men will be rewarded according to their deeds and women according to theirs. Rather ask for Allah's bounties. Surely Allah has perfect knowledge of all things. So we said this ayah comes after the ayah prohibiting people from taking wealth illegally and murder, and this ayah comes after that because desiring what other people have often opens the door to many sins, right? To take other people's wealth, to kill somebody as a result of envy. And we said that this ayah was revealed, according to some reports, based upon Salama radiallahu anha asking the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that why is it that the women can go, the men can go for jihad and they can get all the reward and we can't? We get half the inheritance of men. So these questions obviously didn't come from Salama because she objected to the law. She wanted to know what is the reason, why can't we have the same reward as men when they go for jihad, or why can't we have the same inheritance as them? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent this verse down in response to that وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ, that don't desire what Allah has given some of you over others. And so we had the discussion about envy. We began to speak about hasad and envy and why it's such a sickness of the heart. And we spoke about that there are different types of envy. There is the envy which is, we can classify envy into two types, roughly speaking. You have the envy where you desire for a blessing to be taken away from a person, and then you want that blessing for yourself, and that's that's prohibited. And then you have what is known as ghibta. Ghibta is a type of envy where you desire what other people have, but you don't want that blessing to be taken away from somebody else. This is known as ghibta. So you see someone with wealth and you said, oh, I wish I had their wealth, but you want that person to still have that blessing. This is known as ghibta. Then we went into some detail to explain the different types of tamanni, and we gave the classification of Ibn Ashur from his Tafseer, and he mentioned there are 6 different types of envy. So we said from the 6 that he mentioned, he said that the first and the fourth form aren't prohibited. So the first type of envy is just to desire to have a good quality, nothing to do with anybody else, like desiring martyrdom or desiring to see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's desire to see his brothers, his ikhwan, in reference to those who believed in him even though they didn't see him. So this type of wishing is absolutely fine. The other type of wishing is to wish what the fourth type which he mentioned, which is when to wish a blessing that somebody else has without wanting that blessing to be taken away from them, and that is a good blessing, like the blessing of knowledge or wealth which is spent in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's a good, and that's the meaning of the hadith, La hasada illa fi ithnatayn. There is to be no envy except in 2 cases: when you desire to have somebody else's level of knowledge of Qur'an, and a person who's been blessed with wealth and he spends it in the way of Allah. That's a type of ghibta. Although the hadith mentions hasad, that purely from a technical perspective, we classify it as ghibta, and that's a type of ghibta which is worthy of being envious for or over. As for like desiring, you see someone with a beautiful house, you said, oh, I wish I had a house like that, then this is not befitting, as we will see. So he mentioned the first and the fourth categories are not prohibited. وَأَمَّا التَّمَنِّي الثَّانِي وَالثَّالِث. As for the second and the third type that he mentioned, the second type is to wish for something which is not possible due to either Shar'i reason. Like for example, can a sister inherit the same as her brother? No, right? She can't. From a Shar'i perspective, she can't. So for her to wish for that wouldn't be permissible. Like, I wish I had what my brother had, right? You're wishing for something which the Sharia hasn't sanctioned, and so that wouldn't be correct. And that's why Allah revealed the ayah, وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Don't wish for something that Allah has favored others with over you. That was the second. And the third form, which is not allowed as well, which is a type of wishing which indicates عَدَمُ الرِّضَى, where you wish for something which indicates that you are not pleased with what Allah has decreed for you. Right? So for example, wishing for, you see someone driving an expensive car, and you could just say, I wish I had that, right? Just a fleeting thought. But then you can wish for it in a way which leads to ittirabun nafs and inzi'aj. Like, why don't I have a car like that? Right? Why don't I have a spouse like that? Why don't I have a family like that? And it leads to inzi'aj, this like imbalance within a person, right? And an ittirab, like a person, and this indicates their lack of contentment with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is something which is not allowed, it's prohibited, so he argues. As for the fifth and the sixth type, then they are completely forbidden, which is the two types of envy where you wish the blessing to be removed from a person. All right? And the worst form is when you wish for the blessing to be removed and you don't even want that blessing yourself. You can't help but see, when you see someone happy and enjoying a blessing, you don't want that person to enjoy that blessing. You don't like it. That's the worst form of hasad and envy. So that's the conclusion of the way that Ibn Ashur rahimahullah, he classified the different types of tamanni and wishing. But I want to just stop on this point that we said that when it comes to desiring what other people have, this is a sign, when a person does this a lot, this is a sign that they are lacking in a certain type of ubudiyyah, a certain type of servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we know, as believers, al-khayr biyadillah, goodness lies in the hands of Allah. Wal-khayru biyadayk, goodness lies in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa-sharru laysa ilayk, evil is not to be attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When a believer believes in this, and this belief penetrates a person's heart, in that situation, the person will learn to be content with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees, to such an extent that a person will strip himself from his own desire and his own will. This is known as tajreed, as the scholars of suluk call it. When you strip yourself for any particular desire, you don't insist that you want a particular thing, because you realize, I don't know what's good for me, right? Only Allah knows what's truly good for me. So I assign all of my affairs to Allah. I say, Allah, you decide for me. That's why when Abu Yazid al-Bistami, he was asked, ماذا تريد? What do you desire in life? Like, what do you want? He said, أريد ألا أريد. I want to be in a state where I don't desire anything. Meaning, I don't want to impose something upon Allah as if to say, I know something which is good for me and I want it regardless of whether you decree it or not, but I want it. Right? You're not thinking about, is this something that Allah wants for you? No, you're just thinking about yourself. This is your nafs now at play, your ego. right? I want this thing. You're not thinking about, is it good for me? Does Allah want it for me? Will it be good for my deen and my dunya and my akhirah? No, you desire that thing. You covet that thing, especially if it's what other people have. This is a weakness. This is a weakness. This is a sign that the person hasn't reached that state where he truly desires what Allah has decreed for him. He just desires what he wants or she wants. Right? So think about that statement of Abu Yazid al-Bistami where he said, ماذا تريد? He said, أريد ألا أريد. Or another version, أريد ما أراده الله. I want what Allah wants for me. I want what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for me. So this is a type of ubudiyya. This is a type of servitude, an ubudiyya of the heart that we should try to learn to develop within ourselves. And the way we do that is, number one, by realizing we don't know what's actually good for us. We don't know. As it says in a saying, although it's not an authentic hadith, وَإِنَّ مِنْ عِبَادِي لَفُقَرَاءَ لَوْ أَغْنَيْتُهُمْ لَأَفْتَدَهُمْ الْغِنَى. From my servants are those who are poor. If I was to enrich them, wealth would destroy them. And from amongst my servants are those who are wealthy. وَإِنَّ مِنْ عِبَادِي لَأَغْنِيَاءَ لَوْ أَفْقَرْتُهُمْ لَأَفْسَدَهُمُ الْفَقْرُ. From amongst my servants are those who are wealthy. If I was to make them poor, poverty would destroy them. So we don't know. So we don't actually know. And that's why if you observe the ad'iyah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the du'as of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were generic. When it came to asking for khair, right? His du'as, you'd rarely find him sallallahu alaihi wasallam asking for something very specific. As if to say, Ya Allah, I want this particular thing because I know it to be. And there are certain things you can ask for, like Jannah. You know that's for certain, that's khair. Right? But when it comes to the more detailed matters about where something is subject, it's subjective, whether it will be good for you, maybe the time might not be right. Jannah will always be right for you. Forgiveness will always be right for you. Hidayah will always be right for you. Hasana, goodness, will always be good for you. Right? All of these things will always be good for you. It's not subjective. But wealth is more subjective. Is wealth always good for us? No. And in fact, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to say, Allahumma ja'al quta Muhammadin kafafan, like make my wealth kafaf, like meaning make my daily sustenance just enough to live by. Right? But he would make dua for other people. Allahumma barik lahum fi amwalihim. Right? Oh Allah, bless their wealth. Right? Allahumma akthir malahu. Oh Allah, increase him in wealth. Generic. Right? But we sometimes as people, a sign that we don't really put our trust in Allah is that when we obsess over particular decisions. I don't know what to do. I'm confused. Should I do this or not? Right? That stress and that inzi'aj and that ittirab is a result of you not putting your affairs and giving it and consigning it to Allah subhanahu and assigning it to Allah. If you were to assign it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ, and I give my affairs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'll experience this rahatul bal, this ease, this tranquility, this sakina. Because you're saying to Allah, Ya Allah, you decide my affairs for me, because I don't truly know what's good for me. Rather than drowning in your decision making and drowning in your life's worries and not knowing what's coming your way, right? Assign your affairs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't desire what other people have. Right? وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا وَلِلنِّسَاءِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا اكْتَسَبْنَ. For men, they will have what they have earned, and for women, they will have what they have earned. Now here there is a discussion. What is this in reference to? Men will have what they earned and women will have what they earned. Okay, what could that possibly refer to? Now, as you can see, it's quite generic here, and that's why scholars, they took slightly different approaches, but I'll mention the different approaches here. Either Allah is talking about the nasib meaning that which they will get, a person's nasib, is either in reference to the dunya, or is in reference to the akhirah, or it's in reference to both, the dunya and the akhirah. Now if we understand لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا in reference to the dunya, right, what is that in reference to? Like men will have, because if you think about the context of the verse, remember the context of the verse was that Salama or some of the believers, they said, why is it that men get twice the inheritance of women? Right, so this is talking about wealth now. So look, men will get what they deserve and women will get what they deserve. Meaning, this is the principle. Now some scholars had an issue with this, interpreting this to refer to inheritance, because Allah says, مِمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا, from what they have earned. Inheritance isn't earned. You don't earn inheritance. You are due inheritance. Iktisab means you've put in an effort to earn something. Right, your kasb. You don't put any effort in to earn inheritance. It comes your way, whether you like it or not, isn't it? That's why Imam al-Tabari was of the view, this maybe doesn't refer to inheritance per se, but you can refer to wealth as a whole, because wealth is something that people earn. But others say that no, even iktisab, even inheritance can be earned if we interpret iktasaba here to mean like asaba, meaning men will get what they are due basically, and women will get what they are due. That's it. That's the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Realize this. Okay, so, and we know in the Qur'an, and we've spoken about this in the beginning part of the surah, and the wisdom behind why people might get different levels of inheritance. Right? People get different levels of inheritance. I mean, some of the arguments were quite interesting in some of the riwayat. It mentions that, why is it that women get half the inheritance of men when women are weaker, meaning women are more vulnerable, right? So surely that must mean they should get more money, right? So it shows you that the Sahabiyat were thinking, right? Not, again, remember, as I said, they weren't trying to oppose the law. They were just trying to understand the wisdom behind it. So as I said, this could refer to inheritance as I mentioned, but it can also refer to the generic good things of the worldly life. Allah has decided that men will get a certain type of wealth and women will get a certain type of wealth. Men and women, although they are similar in many ways, they are different in many ways. They have different roles and responsibilities, thus meaning that Allah will give men certain things that men will get, and He will give women certain things that only women will get in life. Right? And there are some fascinating, reports that the authenticity is questionable, but that really indicate that, for example, there was one interesting narration. I don't believe it to be authentic, but the spirit in the saying makes sense. So when one of the women came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and explained, there's a difference between men and women, he said, the talq, you don't understand, when a woman, she has contraction pains, right, when she's giving birth, and that pain, the amount of ajr she gets is unfathomable. We don't know. You don't appreciate how much reward you get. Does a man ever experience contraction pains? No. For every massa, for every time she breastfeeds a child, right? For every massa, for every suckle, is as if she's giving life to a human being. كإحياء الميت. She's giving life to someone, saving somebody's life. Again, these reports are maybe type of exaggeration, but the point being is that it's true at the end of the day that women do certain things that make them end up getting more reward than men, and vice versa. Like men can go into battle, like women can't, but women get the ajr of bringing up the children, right, breastfeeding a children or giving birth to a child. A man can't do that. So there are differences, but these differences, they complement one another. As for the reward in the afterlife, if we say لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ, then nasib refers to the afterlife. Yes, it's true that men can do certain actions like we mentioned, like jihad, that women might not be able to do to the same degree. So they get the reward of jihad, but women get the reward of other things, as we mentioned, like bringing up children, the labor, and taking care of the home, and what have you, right? So that's why Al-Razi, he says, there are certain things that women, like, ta'atu azwajihin, like being obedient. So a woman gets reward for being obedient to her husband. That same paradigm doesn't exist for a husband. Okay, if the husband is obedient to his wife, he doesn't get reward, right? If he's obedient, I mean, that's not the paradigm we're dealing with, right? It's the other way around. So if she's obedient to her husband, right, she gets reward. وقيامها بمصالح البيت من الطبخ والخبز وحفظ الثياب والمصالح المعاش. Taking care of the home, basically. That's something that the woman usually does rather than the man. So the other view is that Allah is talking about everything. Yani the nasib of the dunya and the akhirah. لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ. So men will have the portion of what they earn in the dunya and the akhirah, and women have their own way of getting what they are entitled to in the dunya and the akhirah. So essentially what Allah is saying is, don't view everybody, right, through your own lens. And there are two paradigms here. So that there is something for men and something for women. This is the point. Right, so don't look over to what men are getting and what they're entitled to and what they deserve, and forget that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made women differently, and so as a result you should be just looking at your own responsibilities, your duties, what you are capable of earning in terms of reward. That's what you should be focused on. Otherwise, if you're looking over the fence like that, it can lead to this ittirab, this psychological imbalance within a person that makes life very difficult to manage. وَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, وَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. Ask Allah from His grace. Ask Allah for His grace. See, this is something Allah is teaching the companions, teaching the believers. When you see someone and you start to desire what they have, right, instead of desiring that specific thing, rather, because remember that specific thing might not be good for you, so rather ask for Allah's fadl, ask for Allah's grace, right? Allahumma inni as'aluka min fadlik, yani I ask of your fadl, I ask of your grace, right? I ask of your rizq. Leave it generic like that. Don't drown in the details, because you don't know what's truly good for you, right? And Allah loves to be asked. Inna Allah yuhibbu an yus'al. Allah loves to be asked. So ask Allah from His grace. Imam al-Tabari, though, here he interpreted fadl, by the way, not to refer to fadl in terms of like rizq and na'im and delight and pleasure of the dunya, but fadl here is actually the true fadl from Allah is His tawfiq for amal. Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving you the tawfiq to do greater deeds, the ability to do greater deeds, right? Because that is where the true grace comes from. So if you're worried that, look, men are doing jihad and women can't do jihad, then ask Allah from His grace. He will guide you and give you the tawfiq to be able to do other types of actions where you can earn similar types of rewards. Right? And that's why we mentioned the hadith in the beginning, where some of the companions, they said, look, the wealthy people are taking all the reward. But Rasulullah said, didn't Allah, alaysa qad ja'ala Allahu lakum ma tasaddaquna bihi? Hasn't Allah given you things you could do sadaqah with? For every tahleela, for every tahmeeda, for every subhanallah, alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. Every of those statements is an act of charity. Right? Amr bil ma'roof wa nahi 'ani munkar. Yani enjoying the good, forbidding the evil is an act of charity. All of these are acts of charity as well. So that Allah has given you multiple means to worship. And so, وَاسْأَلُ اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ, ask Allah from His grace, and ask Allah to give you the tawfiq to be able to do those deeds that will get you the reward of what other people are maybe doing. وَاسْأَلُ اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. Al-Razi, he adds an important point, that when he says وَاسْأَلُ اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ, he says هذا تنبيه. Here, there's a point here that أن الإنسان لا يجوز له أن يعين شيئا في الطلب والدعاء, that a person shouldn't be so specific when making dua. Like there was a companion that said, "Oh Allah, I ask for a palace on the right hand side when I enter into paradise," and and he started going into irrelevant details. And the Rasul said, "What is this?" Ask Allah for Jannah, that's it. You don't need to mention these irrelevant details, right? Rather, what we should do, rather than, as I said, drowning in the details, which I said are an indication of your deficiency in your servitude in recognizing that all good is in the hands of Allah, right? Then what is better for a person, وَلَكِنْ يَطْلُبْ مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ مَا يَكُونُ سَبَبًا لِصَلَاحِهِ فِي دِينِهِ وَدُنْيَا عَلَى سَبِيلِ الْإِطْلَاقِ. Rather, a person should ask from the grace of Allah in a generic way that which will be good for a person's deen and dunya in a generic way. And that's, if you look, observe and study the du'as of the Prophet ﷺ, you find them all to be of that category, practically. Right? Allahumma inni as'aluka khayra ma sa'alaka bihi abduka wa nabiyyuka Muhammad ﷺ. Oh Allah, I ask for whatever good the messenger, your prophet, meaning the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, has asked of. Whatever good he's asked of, I ask for that as well. And you were saying, even I don't know. So, Rasulullah knows better. So whatever khair he asked of, I am asking for that as well. Right? So subhanAllah, and it's like you're saying, I don't know what's good for me. Right? I don't know what's truly good for me. So was'alullaha min fadlihi. Ask Allah from His grace. Inna Allah kana bi kulli shay'in alima. Allah, He is knowledgeable. He knows بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا, and He is knowledge of all things. Why mention this here at this point? Allah is alim. He knows. مَنْ يَسْتَحِقُّ الدُّنْيَا فَيُعْطِيهِ. Allah knows those who deserve the dunya and who is good for, so He gives to them. And He knows. Allah يَعْلَمْ مَنْ يَسْتَحِقُّ الْفَقْرِ فَيُعْطِيَهُ الْفَقْرِ. He knows those who deserve to be in a state of poverty, so to give them poverty. He knows those who are most deserving of tawfiq, so as to give them the tawfiq to do certain types of actions. He knows best. Inna Allah bi kulli shay'in alim. So we don't know maybe the precise details of the wisdoms behind the way inheritance is distributed. Why sometimes a person gets a sixth, or sometimes a person gets a third, sometimes a person gets a half or 2/3. We might not know the intricate details, but Allah is alim. Bi kulli shay. Inna Allah kana bi kulli shay'in alima. Allah is knowledgeable of all things. And that's a governing principle that we must remember. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. That concludes the ayah and therefore today's lesson. So we will stop there for today, inshallah. If there are any questions from the floor, we'll take them now. And just a reminder before people leave, there's no lesson next week. Okay, so there's no lesson next week, but inshallah we will resume the week after. Yeah. Inheritance, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So a wife, yeah. Okay. Ah, yeah. A dispute, rift. Okay, so in a situation where, so in this situation, a person dies leaving behind a wife and a brother and a sister. Yeah, so technically the brother and the sister are the residual heirs, so they will take whatever remains after the wife takes her quarter. So the wife is entitled to a ruba', 1/4, and the brother and the sister takes what remains. The brother will take twice the share of his sister. If they don't know this ruling, right, you should advise them, right? Because this is, a part of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. And at-ta'awun 'ala al-birri wat-taqwa. The last thing you want to do is allow this to happen and the inheritance gets distributed wrongly. The best way to deal with it, if you're fearful that it will lead to a rift, what I would advise is tell them that, look, I'm not doing this, I'm not telling you this to cause problems, but to give people their due right by what Allah has determined. Yeah? And make it clear, this is a religious ruling. It's not, I'm not doing this to make it hard on the wife, right? But technically the brother and the sister would be entitled to it.
What is the residual heir
Yeah.
for going for like what would make
You-
ownership relations?
Yeah, that's fine. You can forfeit your right. Yeah, not a problem. If you're an heir and you don't want to take your share and you want to give it to somebody else, you can do so. It's your haqq at the end of the day. You can give up your haqq. Yeah. Yeah. تفضل. Yeah. صحيحة؟ نعم، القراءة بعد الفاتحة من السنن في الصلاة وليست من الواجبات. فحتى لو تعمدت ترك قراءة القرآن بعد الفاتحة فالصلاة صحيحة إن شاء الله. لا عليك، لا عليك. لا 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 لا, لا تلزم إعادة الصلاة. القراءة بعد الفاتحة كما قلت من سنن الصلاة، فلو تركتها فالصلاة صحيحة، لا تجب عليك السهو، سجود السهو، ولا أن تعيد الصلاة. نعم.
بسبب النسيان اللي عندي 7 سنوات انا مضروب عيني ومبهدلني بالنسيان.
الله المستعان.
والله بقرا القرآن كل يوم ما
الحمد لله.
ابغى اطلع من الموضوع اللي انا فيه. النسيان يضيع حياتي صراحة.
سبحان الله. هذا النسيان يتعلق بالعبادات أو في كل جوانب حياتك؟
في كل شيء.
في كل شيء.
الحين تكلمت معاك بكره يمكن انسى. الحمد لله لما ضربت عيني اول مره ما كنت اعرف ايش هو. ذهبت الى المستشفى قالوا ما في شيء صحيا. اول ما تكلمت مع الشيخ قال لي ضربت عيني. فقرأ علي القرآن الحمد لله الآلام اللي كانت في جسدي راحت، لكن المشكلة ان النسيان والله معظم الناس هنا انا اعرفهم واشوفهم كل يوم الحمد لله، لكن انسى اساميهم.
سبحان الله.
بسبب النسيان هذا.
سؤال، هل تلتزم بالأذكار اليومية؟
معظم الأوقات اللي بقرأ القرآن أكثر مما أذكر.
القرآن مرض العين والوساوس لابد أن تلتزم بالأذكار اليومية، في الصباح والمساء، بعد صلاة الفجر وبعد صلاة العصر. فحاول إن شاء الله تقرأ، مثلا ممكن تقرأ من كتاب حصن المسلم، فيه فصل في الأذكار الصباح والمساء، تقعد بعد الصلاة ربع ساعة مثلا أو أقل، تقرأ شيء، لا سيما من التعوذات، أعوذ بكلمات الله التامة من شر ما خلق. هذا لازم، لرجل في حال مثلك، لا بد أن تقرأ أعوذ بكلمات الله التامة من شر ما خلق، وكذلك بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم.
والله بسبب النسيان هذا أي أذكار كنت أعرفها مسحت، لكن
تقرأ من كتاب. إن شاء الله إن شاء الله إن شاء الله يسر الله لك. آمين آمين. يسر الله لك. بارك الله فيك. Okay. how does one atone from drinking, given that it is a major sin? Well, the first thing is make tawbah from it, of course, and trying to stop. So, as you know, the conditions for tawbah is that number one, you stop committing the sin, you have immense regret, right, and that you intend not to go back to the sin, right? So, as long as you fulfill those things, that you make tawbah, like you ask Allah to forgive you, you have that regret, you stop, right, and you intend not to go back to it, that's your tawbah done. If you go back to the sin again, then just keep making the tawbah, right? Keep making the tawbah, and don't think, Allah has forsaken you if you end up going back to the sin. Right? Allah will still keep forgiving you as long as you seek His forgiveness, right? Allah will continue to forgive as long as you seek His forgiveness. Don't give up. That's the key thing. Wallahu a'lam. If you had a dream of your deceased parent, how do you know if it is the real them? Well, if it's like a type of nightmare, right, where where you're in a state of fear and you see like demons and things like that, then that's an indication that maybe this is from shaitan. But otherwise, if you see your parent as they actually were, in terms of physical appearance, it could be because you were thinking of them that day, right? Some thought, something image you saw, or some item, triggered something in your subconscious. But it could be that no, actually, you are actually seeing your actual parent, and that's very possible. There's no way to be 100% sure. There's no way to be 100% sure, because it could be that you were just desiring to see your parent, right? But usually it's a good sign is if you see that dream without thinking about your parent. Maybe you haven't thought about your parents for a long time, and then you suddenly see a dream of them. Maybe that's an indication. We could say that could be them that you are seeing in your dream. And inshallah, usually dreams have a purpose, right? If they are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, either it's a message that is being sent on, like in terms of a comforting message, right? To realize that your parents are, for example, in a good place. Like many people have dreams of their parents being in paradise, right? Wearing white clothing, being washed by the angels. These are dreams people have of their parents, right? And these are all good signs, and that acts as a motivation for the person to increase in their dua for their parents, right? To remember them, right? And to continue on their path of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Why do we say أقدره in istikhara when Allah has decreed everything? فَقْدِرْهُ لِي. إِن كُنْتَ تَعْلَمْ, like if you know this matter to be good, then decree it for me. Right? So yet it's true that everything has been decreed. But what you're saying, from your perspective, you don't know what's good for you. Right? If it is good for you, then make it happen. And as you know, when you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah can make anything happen. لا يرد الدعاء لا يرد القدر إلا الدعاء. Nothing repels qadr except for dua. Otherwise, if we were to say this, then what's the point making dua at all in life? Because everything's been decreed. Do you see? Like everything's been decreed from the moment we came into this earth. Everything's been decreed, even before we came into this earth. Right? Everything was decreed. So why make dua for anything? No, that's a wrong understanding. Because Allah knows whether you are going to make dua or not. So you have to factor that in when you think about the decree. Yeah? So your mind shouldn't be focused on what is the actual decree at the end. Your focus should be on what could I do to facilitate the decree from actually happening or not happening. All right? Yes, sir. Alaykum salam. Yeah.
If father was to pass away, and obviously he has children, and vice versa, if the mother was to pass away,
Yeah.
and he has children.
Do you mean how is it distributed? Ah, okay. So if a parent passes away and they leave behind children, right? The children take all of the inheritance. Yeah, the wife gets inheritance as well. Yes. So in the situation, for example, if a husband dies, he leaves behind a wife and children, then the wife will get an eighth of the total estate, and the rest will be split between the sons and the daughters, with the sons taking twice the share of the daughters. Right? If the wife dies, then the husband gets a quarter, right? And the husband gets a quarter, and the children get what remains, basically. That's the general ruling. No, so the siblings will be blocked by the children, right? So if there are children, then the children will block the siblings from getting anything, right? And if there are no children, right, then the rest will go to the siblings. Yep. Yep.
Regarding the even the children like a female.
What about the female?
She only has a daughter. Is the daughter gonna block the sibling of the father?
Is the daughter going to block the?
Sibling of the father.
No. So the daughter, if a person dies leaving behind a wife and a daughter and siblings, yes, so the daughter will only get a half. Yeah, she gets a half. The wife will get a quarter. No, the wife will get an eighth, and the rest will go to the siblings. Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah, because the son is a residual heir, right? So the residual heir blocks the other residual heirs. So yeah, but the daughter takes a fixed share. She's from Ashab al-Furud, so she will take a half. Yeah. Well, usually a person will write in their will. They can write in their will a what is called a wasi, an executor. And if you write in your will, I want to appoint so and so to execute my will, then that person will have that jurisdiction. If they don't, if they haven't left anybody, right, and the wealth is just left for the family to decide, then they should split it according to the laws of the Sharia, right? If they don't know what the laws are, I would advise them to go to like a Sheikh or an Imam and say, look, so and so in our family died, and we want to know how our inheritance is to be distributed. It's important we know that, because it's not for us to decide how it's to be distributed. It has to be distributed according to the Sharia. And unfortunately, many people are ignorant of that. Yeah, they just think, yeah. I mean, everywhere you go, it's one of the, Rasulullah said it's from the signs of the hour. Yani this is one of the first types of knowledge that will be taken from the ummah. And so in nearly all cases that I see and deal with, everyone does it wrong. Most people do it wrong, subhanAllah. And so much dhulm. A person will die and they say, oh, because I'm the wife, I take all. And she doesn't leave anything her children. Things like that, it's Allah al-Musta'an. Yeah, it's Eastman. Yeah.
Quick question. In regards to like adopting a child, obviously that's not the right term.
Yeah.
It's in adopting.
Yeah.
But taking on and having like he's like a nephew. How does it work if you die? And for example, he's the only one.
Yeah.
Alive.
Mm-mm-mm.
Or if there are other children that you actually.
Yeah. Are you talking about from the perspective of inheritance? Yeah, so as you said, we don't call it adoption. It's called, fostering a child. Yeah, so you're looking after a child. So that's fine, but there are no legal consequences for you looking after a person, a child, right? So if you were to die, they don't get to inherit from you. However, if you want, you can dedicate a portion of your estate to non-heirs. So that child would be your non-heir technically. So you can dedicate up to 1/3 of your estate to a non-heir. So you can say, I want 1/3 or less than that, right, to go to this foster child of mine, and that will be fine. That's not a problem. But anything beyond that is not allowed. The rest should go to your heirs, your rightful heirs. So that person has no parents, no grandparents, no siblings, no children. But do they have siblings? Yeah, then siblings are heirs as well, right? Siblings are heirs. You know, you have grandparents, you have obviously partners, husbands and wives. You have grandparents, you have siblings, you have uncles, you have cousins. They all inherit, right? But obviously, in most cases, they'll be blocked. Like if you have children, that's it. Khalas. If you have children and a spouse, they take everything, and nobody else gets anything, because they block the the closer relatives block the more distant ones if they are present, basically. Yeah. 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 So that's fine. So like asking for dhurriya tayyiba, but notice the tayyiba, right? Meaning where it's good in essence. Yeah. So that is asking, I mean, that I would argue is more generic than specific. Right? Like specific would be like, I want to marry this person. Yeah? Or, I want to study in this university. Right? Now you're making it very specific. Now it's not wrong to ask. We're not saying it's haram to ask for that. But is it the best way to ask? That's the issue. Right? That's what we were trying to say. But asking for dhurriyatan tayyiba, that's generic, I would say. And it doesn't fall under the specifics. If it's a situation, for example, I mean, look at Zakaria, لا تذرني فردا, like don't leave me alone without a child, right? But what was his intention? Okay, what was his intention? Was his intention that he was like desperate for a child, just for the sake of having a child? That's what he wanted. Was it for a noble intention that cannot be but good? Right? So he wanted a child after what he saw with Maryam, isn't it? When he saw that she was someone who was so righteous and so blessed, that's what he wanted. And there's nothing wrong for a person to want that in life, right? To want a righteous child that is, pious and that worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it's for that reason, that's absolutely fine to ask for that. That's not a problem. Yeah. Here we're just talking about the mindset of the person. Yeah, the mindset. What is the mindset of the person? And there are some situations which are not as ideal as can be. That was a point, basically. Yeah. Wallahu alam. How does one practically achieve not wanting, quote unquote, not wanting? There are some matters I can't stop myself from wanting or worrying about. Example: marriage, children, Hajj, etc. So, as I said, this relates to the previous question. I mean, there are certain things which are undoubtedly always going to be good. Like Hajj is always a good thing, right? To ask Allah to give you the tawfiq to do Hajj is always a good thing, right? Maybe when to do Hajj, you can say, look, I don't know when I'm going to do Hajj. Like you might be desperate for Hajj to be that year. Just say, rather than like be desperate about it being this year, in the years to come, right? Rather than focusing it has to be this year, right? Wanting your children to be righteous, is that ever subjective? That's always khair, right? Okay, marriage is maybe, if it's marriage is, again, it depends. Are you asking to marry a specific person, or marriage in general that will be good for your deen? That's fine. You can ask for that. That's not a problem. So when, like Abu Yazid al-Bistami, he said, Urid Allah urid, I want to be in a state where I don't want anything in specific. He's talking about a very, very high level here, right? A very high level where a person has just stripped his desires of anything and he just wants his desires to conform with what Allah has decreed for him. So for example, some people are struggling to get married. Some people are struggling to get married, right? So is marriage really going to be good for a person or not? We don't actually know, right? For some people, maybe being alone is actually better for them. Maybe that person that you end up getting married to, will ruin your life. You don't know. You don't actually know, right? Maybe the khair lies in you remaining single. So approach, and you can take, I mean, you could say, oh Allah, look, I want to be married, right? Help me, assist me in getting married. That's fine. You can make that dua, right? Because you want to protect yourself from haram and what have you. That's not a problem. But another way, because remember, ubudiyyah is very diverse. Yani the way you worship Allah and manifest your servitude to Him is diverse. So sometimes maybe you can just resign to Allah, your affair to Allah, and say, you know what, at the end of the day, Allah, I don't know what's good for me. Just give me whatever is better for me. If remaining single is better for me, then make me single. Right? At times you might feel as though, no, I want to engage in dua. I want to express, that, oh Allah, I'm in need of His help and assistance. You can do that, that's fine. You have this talween, as the scholars refer it, talween, this diversity in ubudiyyah, in servitude. Right? You can manifest it in different ways. Look when Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he was thrown into the fire, right? Jibreel, he came to him and said to him, Allah has sent me to you to see if you have any need. He said, as from you, I don't have any need. Right? I don't need anything. Then he said, oh no, okay then, not from me, from Allah. Do you have any need that Allah can fulfill for you? He said, hasbuhu wa hasbi wa hasba ilmuhu bihali. Right? Like, meaning, min su'ali. Yani, Allah's knowledge of my state at this moment in time is enough for me. Meaning, I know Allah is aware of my situation. Ilmuhu bihali, hasbuhu. Yani, His knowledge of my hal is enough for me. Min su'ali, from me needing to ask Him. Because I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to those who remember Him. Right? تعرف إلى الله في الرخاء يعرفك في الشدة. Know Allah in times of ease, Allah will know you in times of difficulty. And he's saying to Allah, Ya Allah, I'm suffering, but I know that you are aware of my situation. That's how he expresses his ubudiyyah. He doesn't actually raise his hands to Allah and say, Ya Allah, save me. But that's the way he chose to express his ubudiyyah. But if a person in the same situation said, I cannot but help, ask Allah, Ya Allah, save me from the fire, that's fine, that's good. When Ayub alayhi salam, right, when he was afflicted with his disease, what did he say? Anni massani ad-durr wa anta arhamur rahimin. Ya Allah, I've been afflicted with hardship, with harm, and you're the most merciful. He didn't say, Ya Allah, save me. Oh Allah, give me shifa. He just said, massani ad-durr wa anta arhamur rahimin. He didn't even ask Allah directly. He just said, you're the most merciful of those who show mercy. So how is he expressing his ubudiyyah in that situation? He's expressing his belief in the rahmah of Allah. And he's saying, Ya Allah, I believe in your rahmah. You are arhamur rahimin. You are the most merciful of those who show mercy. That belief of mine, that's enough for you to draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with. Right? Look in the hadith where the Prophet, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where Rasulullah spoke about the abd, the servant, who the servant who kept on committing a sin, the same sin, kept on committing it, but he made tawbah every time. But Allah would always forgive him. Why? Because Allah, He said, "Alima abdi anna lahu rabbun yaghfiru dhunub." I forgive him. Why? Because I know that this servant of mine knows that he has a creator that forgives him. So on account of that ilm of that servant, Allah forgave him. Just knowing. So do you see how ubudiyyah, the way you approach Allah, it differs from person to person and situation to situation. Right? It's not the same way for everybody. Certain times you will feel in a certain way. You have this shu'ur and this hudur and this presence with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that maybe you won't even ask Allah a single thing, but you just make tasbih of Allah. Other times you'll just make ilhah in your dua, and you'll just be insisting, Ya Allah, give me this, grant me this. That's fine. There is this diversity to ubudiyyah. That's the important thing we must remember. Allahu alam. Can you expand on obedience of the husband? It depends if there is a brother or sister asking this. Yeah, it's always different. What is interesting is that if you look to the Qur'an, right, Allah doesn't actually rarely speak about the duty of women to their husbands. But in the Qur'an, Allah speaks about the duty of men towards their wives. وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Live with them in a good way. Right? Give them their dowries. Give them their dues. Right? This is all in the Qur'an. In the Sunnah, on the other hand, the Sunnah emphasizes the other way around. Right? If there was anyone that would prostrate, it would be the wife to the husband. Right? Emphasizing rights like that. So really, we need to take this holistic approach, right, when it comes to marital relations, and realize that both are important, the rights of the husband and the rights of the wife. Purely from a fiqhi perspective, right, and remember, brothers and sisters, that when it comes to marital responsibilities and obligations, your marriage is a lot more than rights and obligations. When you reach a situation in your marriage where you're arguing over rights, you're already in a terrible place, right? These huquq and rights are only there to make sure that no dhulm and injustice is taking place. Not to say that this is how we should live. So for example, if I was to just say, the rights of a husband is that she responds to him when he is in need of her sexually, which is a right which all scholars agree upon. That's the most important right. Okay, other rights, like does she have to cook for him, does she have to clean for him, etc. Scholars differ over it, right? And to be honest, most scholars say that's not technically right from a legal perspective, right? She won't be in sin if she didn't cook for him, for example. Now people might think, well, what are you saying? Yani ta'atul zawj is wajib. Yes, ta'a in what though? Like if the husband told the wife to jump up, is she sinful if she doesn't jump up? Right? So anyway, but the point being, don't look at it just from this legal, because if I was to say that's the only obligation, to fulfill the sexual rights of the husband, does the woman say, oh, if that's the case, khalas, you go cook for yourself, you clean for yourself? What type of married life are they going to live? Yeah? What type of married life are they going to live? Is that going to breed harmony and love and affection and rahmah and mawadda? Of course not. Right? It will just lead to animosity and dispute. Right? So that's why you live with each other, as Allah says, bil ma'roof, what is customarily known to be good between people. Right? And what is known to be good between people, you go by that. So for example, in society where the man is expected to work, right? The man, he works, and the woman is at home all day. Of course, you expect her to cook, to clean, right? To take care of the homely needs, right? So I hope that, inshallah, kind of answers the question. And obviously there are more details to that, but I don't want to overwhelm you with the fiqh of these issues. I want you to concentrate more on the spirit of the law in this case. Yes, sir. Alaikum assalam. Generally speaking, there is no inheritance between people of different faiths, right? So if a Muslim dies, then the non-Muslim relative will not inherit. Now, if a non-Muslim dies but leaves a Muslim family member, can that Muslim inherit? According to the majority of the scholars, no. But there is an opinion among some scholars, the opinion of Sheikh Islam ibn Taymiyyah and others, that the Muslim can actually inherit from the non-Muslim. And they argued that the hadith that mentions that the Muslim cannot inherit from the non-Muslim is when it's the time of war, and when the disbeliever is considered a harbi, you're at war with them, and so the Sharia seeks to cut ties from that perspective, not ties in terms of family ties, but that financial line basically. So I think in this situation, what I would say is that if there is a case like that for a Muslim, then they should speak to their local imam and give them, they can give them personal guidance on the issue. Yeah. Allahu a'lam. Is the dua in Surah Furqan for spouses and children considered specific or generic? Generic, as I mentioned before. Should we make dua, "Oh Allah, allow me to get married if it's good for me," or just "allow me to get married," as marriage could actually cause harm to a person? Look, if a person wants to and wants to make that dua, I don't want people to go away thinking it's wrong to ask for a specific thing. I'm not saying that. Right? I'm not saying that. If you want, ask Allah to help you to get married, alhamdulillah, especially if your intentions are good. If your intentions are righteous, like you want to protect yourself from zina, ask Allah to help you, of course. Not a problem. Okay, that's not a problem whatsoever. But just understand that there are different ways you can express your situation and engage with Allah, right? So you can engage with Allah and say to Him, "Ya Allah, I don't know what's good for me, but just decree what's good for me. Whether it is to be married or to remain single. Whatever is good for me, decree that for me." See, that's another way you can engage with Allah, right? And both are fine, that's not a problem. But to insist that you think that you know what is good for you, that's where the problem lies, a slight problem. And it shows you that you are trying to dictate to Allah what's to happen to you in life. Let Allah decide things for you. That's what istikhara is about, essentially. What is the ruling on jihad for women, as it's virtues for them to do that? Yes, so the jihad of women is hajj, as hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha. Yani it's not a practical thing for women to engage in jihad. There might be times where it's possible. That's not in history. There were women who participate in jihad, right? And inshallah they can get the same reward. But when the hadith it mentions that Salama said, you know, we don't get the reward of men because they don't participate in jihad. That's why. But if they were to participate in jihad and they were to die as a woman dies as a shaheed, does she get less reward than a man? No. Inshallah, she gets the same, you know, she gets the status of martyrdom, right? Related to marriage, dua question, as there have been a lot of bad cases and instead of rushing marriage could actually be a bad thing for a person. Yeah, this is not a question it looks like, but yeah. Do we believe in wills in Islam? Absolutely. We do have the concept of wills in Islam. In Arabic we call it wasiyya. Right? So you can have a will. Just make sure that whatever you write in your will conforms to the Islamic laws of inheritance. How to convince your parents to marry outside of your culture. Everything about the person is right, the person is on deen, and everything pleases me. Well, I mean, it depends if you're a brother or a sister asking this, but if you're a brother, then obviously you don't technically need the permission of your parents, although I'm not encouraging you to go against the decision of your parents. Obviously, if you're a sister, you technically need the permission of your guardian. You know, obviously you are in a position where if you are in a position where you need the permission of your guardian, then, you know, if you genuinely believe that this person is good for you, you know, apply pressure in a permissible way. Say that you think that this is right. This person, inshallah, you think is good for you. This is something that you desire and want. But at the end of the day, you can't force the hand of your parent. Right? You can't force the hand of your parent on this issue. I know marrying outside cultures is a sensitive topic. My advice would be, though, just to realize that I know it can sound very un-Islamic, you know, for a person to oppose a marriage based upon differences in culture. Sometimes it is based upon racism, right? Because sometimes parents might not like the race of another person, which is obviously wrong. Sometimes it's out of genuine concern, out of fear, because some people are still very cultural. Sometimes a difference in culture can have an impact on a person's environment. Yeah. So, take for example, Bangladeshis and Pakistanis, right? They generally, well, traditionally, they didn't really see eye to eye very well, right? They had a war with each other, as some of you may know. And so, for example, you know, if a person was to marry into like a Bengali sister married a Pakistani brother, and she's living in a whole household full of very cultural Pakistani women, that could be difficult for the, you know, for the Bengali sister, right? Because you know that her mother-in-law might not actually like her because of the fact that she speaks a different language, different culture, and that could affect her, right? So as a guardian, you might think, I don't have anything against Pakistanis, but I'm worried about, I'm worried about my daughter and her state and how she'll be treated. Is that a genuine reason to oppose a proposal? Yes. Yeah? So you're not opposing it because you're racist or you're inherently anti-Pakistani, right? But it's just that the circumstances aren't, ideal for your daughter. So you have to see that. So sometimes, but when you're young, sometimes you're blinded by your emotions, right, and your desire, and you think, no, they're giving an un-Islamic reason, right? And this happens, and I've seen this where people say, and they even try to change their wali. They say, my wali has given an un-Islamic reason, right? And so I'm going to change my wali. And so what's the un-Islamic reason? Oh, my father was being racist. Yeah? No, it's not as simple as that. Some of them, I've seen people go as far as to say, actually, my wali is not my wali anymore because he doesn't pray, he's a kafir. Right? So, subhanAllah. Right? So she makes takfir of her father, right? Just so that she can marry, appoint another wali. This has happened in the past. So just be careful. Yeah, be careful. May Allah make it easy for you. Right? May Allah make it easy for you. And if it doesn't work out, realize that goodness lies in the hands of Allah, and whatever Allah decrees, it is good for you, inshallah. The last lesson about leaving major sins and minor sins. What about if someone was doing bid'ah, was doing bad bid'ah? What would be his situation? Well, when scholars spoke about bid'ah being a means of preventing a person from having his tawbah accepted, that's because when a person does a bid'ah, a bad bid'ah, they think they're doing something good, so they're not going to be repenting from it. But there are some statements which are somewhat exaggerated to say that sahibul bid'ah, right, none of his du'as are accepted. Right? Now, here we have to understand bid'ah is there is a spectrum of bid'ah. And there is bid'ah which is like borderline, like kufr, and take you outside the fold of Islam. That type of bid'ah, you can maybe say, maybe it will prevent your du'as from being accepted. Right? But when we say bad bid'ah, what are we talking about? Are we talking about people who do du'a after salah, like some people think this is a bad bid'ah and if you do it, your du'as won't be answered? No, these are masail of khilaf. And I would argue most of the things that people, rave on about, this being bid'ah and that, is exaggerated. Right? Exaggerated. People exaggerate masail, they blow it out of proportion, and they make tabdi' and declare people to be heretics when really it's not the case. If the wife is fully obliged to take care of her in-laws and fully serve them every time and look after them fully, can the wife refuse to live with the in-laws? From a Shari'i perspective, a wife is not obliged to take care of her in-laws. Right? She's not obliged, she's not required by the law. However, if she wants to out of goodness, then that's obviously a good thing. Right? The husband should play an important role in making clear to his mother and to his wife what the boundaries are in terms of expectations and rights and responsibilities. So the husband should take an important role here, right? And make these things clear. Sometimes what happens is these problems occur between the wife and the mother-in-law, and the husband just takes a back seat and just allows things to happen, right? That's not good, right? The husband should take more of an active role in helping to resolve any potential issues between the mother-in-law and the wife. Can the wife refuse to live with their in-laws? This is a sensitive topic, right? Technically, if she is being housed by her husband and she has her own privacy, then technically he has fulfilled his duty, right, to shelter his wife and to house his wife, and so therefore she is obliged to stay where he is, basically. If it's in a situation where her own privacy is compromised, meaning she can't sleep in a room in privacy, right, which is a very extreme situation, then she can ask to be housed elsewhere. Right, it's getting quite late. can I reject a suitor solely based on them being younger than me? Absolutely, it's your right. It's your right at the end of the day, and it's not a bad thing if someone is younger than you. I'm assuming this is obviously from a sister, right? That's not a problem, right? I'm younger than my wife, so not a problem. Okay. There has been come to a point where the wife should know if husband is not happy with her posting photos online. She should know she has to. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. Okay, sorry I couldn't answer everybody's questions, but we'll stop there for today. Jazakumullah khairan. Again, reminder, there's no lesson next week. We'll resume the week after that, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanaka wa bihamdika.